Nothing to start off the morning with a nice cup of subpar coffee. So as you guys can already see from the title of the video, I'm going to be talking about my worst Airbnb stay at the Seattle CHAZ shop area. Now I'm going to preface this video that it is 100% my fault and 100% my personal responsibility and ownership from staying at that place. It's nobody's fault. It is 100% my fault that my dumbass did not take the time to do proper research and location scout around the area before booking at this Airbnb. So I have nobody to blame but my own damn self. I'm an idiot, whatever. But regardless of all that, it still doesn't take away from the fact that this was probably, and most likely, and it is, my worst Airbnb stay ever. I don't think anything can ever top this experience. Never have I felt more unsafe in my entire life than my stay at the Seattle CHAZ shop area. Now to give you guys a little backstory, I spent almost a week traveling around Portland, Oregon, hanging out with friends, eating at cool places, and decided to make the drive from Portland to Seattle, which is about a 2.5-hour drive. And I wanted to stay at an Airbnb location inside the city of Seattle because I wanted to visit my girlfriend's aunt who owns a couple Thai restaurants around the Seattle area. So just within a walking distance, it was more so about hanging out with her, hanging out with my girlfriend's aunt, getting to know her, trying out some of her amazing Thai food, which will be in an upcoming video. So I drove to Portland to Seattle, and I knew from the start that I did not like Seattle from the get-go. The first time I visited Seattle was when I was 16, around the early 2000s. Very, very long time ago, and from my childhood experiences, it was a very beautiful city, a lot of great restaurants, you know, a lot of cool art galleries, a very artsy, vibey, liberal place. Like, it was very cool, definitely enjoyed the culture. But after everything that's happened in 2020 with the protests, with the riots, the city, for the lack of a better term, has turned into a massive shithole. There is a high volume of homeless, graffiti, boarded up businesses, restaurants. It is in terrible shape. But anyways, I drive into the city. Those were the first things I noticed was, wow, how terrible of a shape Seattle has become. So I ended up driving and I booked my last minute Airbnb place at the Capitol Hill area, where a couple months ago, that was the area that they declared themselves autonomous away from the United States of America.
So is it really a completely separate government? No, it's really not. But if the cops are going to withdraw, it's a power vacuum. People are going to say, okay, we'll run things then.
Into its own little area of 3 blocks area that was once known as the CHAZ, the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. But my dumbass didn't put 2 and 2 together. All I cared was booking at an Airbnb location close to my girlfriend's aunt's Thai restaurant, so I can just go there for a quick walking distance. So plug my GPS in and I drive over to my Airbnb location and found parking in front of where I was staying. And my God, that place, for the lack of a better term, a massive shithole. The surrounding area was very shady, very dodgy characters coming in. The place I was staying from the outside looked like a massive crack house that was probably the subject of a lot of shady drug dealings and drive-by shootings. It was definitely a very dodgy area to live, to stay in, and I just, my instincts around me, my spidey senses, my instincts were telling me that I just felt unsafe. I couldn't explain why I was feeling this way, but I just felt unsafe the entire time. The Airbnb, aka the shady crack house, a lot of the floorboards, a lot of the wood structures were deteriorating. It was not looking good at all. It was in pretty rough shape. That's just a very generous saying of it. So the Airbnb was split into the upper floor and then the lower floor, and I was staying in the lower deck of the house. So I ended up walking around to the side through the gates. Bushes were overgrown. You can tell the the wood structures were deteriorating. So I go past and the property was not well taken care of. There needs to be a gardener, somebody to manage the bushes. But I go around from the side and walk down a few steps into the entrance of my Airbnb. To my left, there's massive amounts of cigarette butts that have just been chilling on the side on a pot, just laying around there looking like total shit. Near the farther end was an outhouse that looks like, they're gonna film low budget pornos and terrible things. It just was not a good feel at all. So I was like, ugh. I was thinking to myself, what have I gotten myself into? This is not looking good at all. Like, why didn't I do proper research? But luckily I booked 2 nights and that was it. So to get into the residence, I punched in the key, the numeric, the 4-digit combination, and I get into the residence, walk through a very tight corridor, and the common area and kitchen were very small, but it had a pretty rough, nasty stench going through. The whole common area, kitchen area looked straight out of a horror film. It was pretty shady, really dodgy, definitely a daytime horror scene. A lot of the kitchen area, a lot of the areas were developing mold, deteriorating. There was a Captain Crunch cereal box that was just lying around out of nowhere. There was probably scrambled egg residue on top of the stove in a pan. It was definitely looking pretty rough. Definitely not a good setup. It smelled, it was terrible. So I was like, all right, whatever, let's just proceed through with it. So I booked a private room with a shared shower, kitchen, common area. And there were 2 other guests that was staying in that Airbnb with me. One of them seemed like an okay guy, and then the other guy was, oh my god, the guy was a massive riot. This guy was a massive idiot. I hated this guy, but we'll get into that a little later. So I go into my room, and it was a very average room. It was an okay room, To be fair, it was a very average room. There was nothing bad about it. However, when I tried sleeping in that room, it smelled, the blankets and everything smelled a strong stench of bleach and mildew. I had a hard time falling asleep. We'll get into that in a bit. So I dropped my things off in my room. I had a lot of valuables, a lot of camera equipment. I had my laptop. I was able to lock my room from within, but there was no lock when I close my door and leave the room. And the Airbnb host had a policy where if I wanted a key to lock my room from the outside, I would have to give him $10, which I think was absolutely total bullshit, straight up scam. But I didn't really have a choice. I had a lot of filming equipment. I had a lot of high valued items that I didn't want to be stolen, and I just didn't feel safe leaving these items in my car, where Seattle has notoriously, or as of this year, has been dealing with a lot of high crimes. So I told my Airbnb host that, hey, blah blah blah, like, I'm gonna give you $10. Can you please give me a room key? And I paid the guy $10. He says, we'll give you the key the next following day. So I couldn't even get the key on the spot. I had to wait for another business day so they can bring in the key. However, a couple hours later, I did change my mind. I was willing to risk it. So I said Airbnb host if he could refund the $10 back for me. And he said, no refunds whatsoever, even though I never had possession of the key. That shady motherfucker, fuck that Airbnb host. So that definitely tells me about his character and how much of a douchebag that guy was. But whatever, what can you do? You can bitch and whine all you want, but what can you do? So I decide to leave all my valuables in, take the chance, and leave my Airbnb because I did not want to stay in that depressing, horrific, smelly, dangerous place of my Airbnb stay, aka the Capitol Hill Crackhouse, as I like to call it now. So I leave the Crackhouse and leave out of that shady, dodgy area, and I walk over to my girlfriend's aunt's Thai restaurant, which is all within the Capitol Hill area of Seattle. So 3 minutes as I was leaving my Crackhouse Airbnb, there was a homeless guy donned in like goggles and a mask. This guy was probably drunk or he was on something, but he comes up to me and starts bowing to me out of nowhere. This motherfucker just bows to me, probably because I'm Asian, and he probably thinks that's what all Asian people do. So I look at him, I just give him a nervous smile, and I'm like, this motherfucker, fuck this guy, this racist motherfucker, what a piece of shit. Fuck this guy. So I end up just ignoring him, and I just keep walking past. So I end up walking 15 minutes to my to my girlfriend's aunt's Thai restaurant, you know, all within the Capitol Hill area. It's a very, you know, very artsy, liberal place. Kind of reminds me of Berkeley, California. As I was getting closer to Gina's Thai restaurant, I see a black guy shouting at what appears to be an Indian gentleman in his Toyota Camry. It was probably a verbal confrontation. I don't know what the context was, but the black dude yelled at him, "Don't fuck with me, I've killed a lot of motherfuckers. Kids, grandmas, you name it." And then says, "You 7-Eleven motherfucker. Thank you, come again." I'm just like thinking to myself, holy shit. You know, to a city that prides itself on its liberal, open-minded, progressive policies, you've got a lot of racist motherfuckers roaming around these streets. I meet up with the auntie, we chit-chat, we talk, we catch up. 5 minutes within meeting her, there was a fight that broke out from across the street. I go out, I check, and it was these two hippies getting into a fight with like a normal dude. Crazy, crazy shit that's going on. The liberal hippies of Seattle have now turned into violent liberal hippies. You know, just witnessing all of this shit that's been going on, it makes me think like, wow, like this is the result of poor, terrible, Democrat liberal governance that has turned Seattle, particularly the Capitol Hill, into a massive shithole. The place is terrible. I know me talking about politics, it's gonna ruffle some people's feathers. People are gonna get pissed off. They're gonna call me a raging Trump supporter, but listen, like you can't deny the fact that poor, terrible Democrat liberal governance, you know, with the mayors and the governors in charge, have turned their respective cities into massive shitholes with high volumes of homeless people everywhere, graffiti, urine smell. Place is not a suitable place to be living or visiting. It's terrible. I don't care what you say. It is terrible. You know, after I hang out with Gina, my girlfriend's aunt, I end up walking back 15 minutes from her restaurant back to my crack house Airbnb. And just passing through the, I think it was called the Cal Anderson Park, where a lot of tents were set up during the occupation of the CHAZ shop. There were a lot of tents that were set up in that park, a lot of homeless people just hanging out, kids riding around their bikes. It felt pretty unsafe. I have to admit, it was I felt generally unsafe, did not feel like I was in my element. It was a pretty dodgy, it felt really dodgy. Like I felt like I was walking through the Tenderloin district in San Francisco during the nighttime. It was definitely a pretty bad vibe going back to my crack house of an Airbnb. But I finally made it there safely, and you know, I get settled. You know, it was already 10:30 at night, so brushed my teeth, got ready for bed, and tried to get some sleep. Except that I had a hard time falling asleep because my blankets, my mattress had a strong stench of bleach smell. It was pretty bad. I can definitely smell the mildew. Everything was keeping me up. But I was able to fall asleep for about a good solid 30 minutes until one of my neighbors just busted in through the door at 12:30 in the morning, singing and talking extremely loudly, and just woke my ass up. And I'm just like, fuck, man, like, do you really have to do that? You know, this guy was like singing nonstop in the middle of the night while everybody else was trying to get some sleep. But instead of confronting him, I just ignored it. You know, I figured to myself, you know what, this guy will probably stop eventually and will eventually go to sleep. Which eventually he did. He finally shut up and probably went to sleep around 1:30 in the morning. I know because I kept checking my time on my phone and was like, okay, this guy finally went to bed at 1:30 in the morning, so I'm gonna try to get some sleep. Again, you know, I had a really hard time trying to fall asleep, but I eventually did, until at approximately 4:46 in the morning, this motherfucker wakes up again and starts singing and talking extremely loudly, and starts cooking breakfast at 5 in the morning. This guy's like cooking eggs, breakfast, whatever. The walls are extremely thin. My room is closest to the kitchen. So I wake up and I'm just like, fuck my life, what the fuck? You know, this guy cooks breakfast. I end up waking up, I'm just half asleep, pissed off. And I just end up going outside to take a piss. So this guy cooks breakfast, and after he finishes his cooking breakfast, this guy goes on his laptop, and I think he's like making a conference call with one of his friends, or he's talking to himself. I think like at 5 in the morning, I think he's talking about like nodes, or I don't know what this guy was like what this guy's into. I don't know if he's like a computer hacker or a programmer. This guy's talking about nodes or some crap, but he was on the phone. Whatever he was doing, he was on the phone talking extremely loudly, having no regard to his neighbors. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, this guy is a fucking piece of shit. So I'm just completely pissed off. Forget it. And I just made the on-the-call decision that I'm not gonna stay another night at this place. I'm just gonna pack all my shit and I'm gonna get out and I'm just gonna leave in my car. After one horrible night, there's no point in subjecting yourself to stay another night at such a terrible place. I don't care how good of a deal or how low of a cost that deal is. You pay for what you get. So anyways, I pack all my things, move it into my car, and I get out. Had I just spent the extra $50, $100 and stayed at a hotel or at a nicer place in the city or even outside of the city of Seattle and stayed over in Redmond or Bellevue, one of those places, my experience would have been so much better. More of the story, spend the extra $50 to $100 and stay at a nicer place. Stay at a nicer Airbnb, stay at a nicer hotel, you know, just so you have that comfort, that security, that safetiness, so you don't have to worry about shit pissing you off, waking you up in the middle of the night, your life being threatened. Because I tell you, in the year of 2020, there's no such thing as nice hippies, all right? All the hippies have gone violent, have become extremist, so your safety and your security is your top priority. Other than that, I think Seattle, I stayed in Seattle for 2 days. It's not as of a vibrant city as it once was. If you do decide to visit Seattle, go ahead and visit there, but visit there at your own cost. It is not looking good at all. I just want to end this off on a positive note. Do your proper research. Generally stay outside of the city and spend the extra $50 to $100 staying at a nicer place, just so you guys have that comfort, that security, and that safety. And don't stay in the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, or the Capitol Hill, or whatever they call it. It's 100% my fault, my responsibility. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope you guys got a good laugh out of my misery. Take care, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.